So okay, I'll give
always
you
left in
the
suspense.
options.
Okay.
Lizard,
Yeah.
beetle,
Okay.
bee, ant, bacteria,
Okay.
virus,
All right.
meerkat, a pine marten, a hedgehog, or a great ape.
I don't know. I'd like for it to be a bee or a lizard, but I'd also be cool with bacteria. If it's a virus, I'm going to be properly upset. Smikes, it's on you. I know you're saying you didn't do it. It's on you if it's a virus.
Drumload, Chad. The new species of the week is a lizard.
It's a lizard.
So, Lita, this they discovered actually multiple new species of lizard. This is in China that they've been surveying this page. So there are multiple new species of this lizard, and actually they're really, really pretty. I wanted to show y'all some videos of them. So there's a lot of differences between males and females. In particular, they have a mating season. And during the mating season, you actually get effects like this. So this one up here in panel B is a male, and you can see they actually turn this like orange shade of color.
With the little black beard.
Yeah. They do change colors during mating season, which I thought was really cool. They also have a unique like hunting, stalking behavior that they do for their prey. And this is that breeding color, so the changes in color during that mating season. And I just thought it's kind of neat. It's 15 seconds of a video. It's just watching them like crawl around, but kind of the different colors and the scales, like this really brilliant, beautiful color. And this does come with a sad bit of news. So because they're so pretty, they are regularly hunted during this is the male. They're regularly hunted during mating seasons. And they're considered medicinal.
Rude.
So there is, in fact, no substantive science behind these animals having any kind of medicinal use. They are just, unfortunately, hunted. The reason the study was so long is because they were trying to do almost a collection screen of what is the endangered status of them. So they were doing surveys of these animals for several years to see how it was affected. So let me show y'all images. Here again are the lizards that they identified. So these are the lizards in question, the new species. So there were 4 new ones described. 2 of them were actually new species. The other 2 used to be one species, but now with further testing and measurements, they're like, actually, these are 2.
Okay, so we went from 1 species to 4.
Yeah, in in a given range. And actually, there's a really nice map. So one thing I do like about these last 2 papers actually is that they put in a nice map of where the samples were found. So like the cluster of like this little southern peninsula.
Can they breed? Smikes is always interested in this question.
That is a great question. They did not check that. Smikes, of all of our studies that we've looked at, I don't think we've ever come across anything where they did anything like forced matings.
That would be like properly nuts. I would see that in the I would genuinely like to see that described in the scientific paper. In a newly discovered species.
So Ian, it's not that if they breed or not, it's if these other species that you've labeled as 2 species, do those breed?
And not just do they breed, but do they produce offspring that are capable of that are fertile and capable of producing offspring of their own? Like there's so many questions in that. And then also a lot of people would argue that even if they're genetically compatible, if their mating signals are different enough in nature that they wouldn't naturally breed with one another, that is sufficient to count as a separate species. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, so Ian, if they can successfully hybridize, by meaning that the next generation, the F1, can also reproduce and continue producing offspring. Yeah. So in theory, right, they could have observed and put them together or something but there's nothing in the paper about that, right? Like it's just the only reason I even brought up is that the matings, because with fruit flies that we've worked in the past, you can put 2 close relative species together, and if there are some that are close enough related that they will interbreed, and you can get an F1, and then those are sterile.
An offspring. By F1, So I think a slightly less abstract way of thinking about this is donkeys and horses. So if you guys are familiar with mules, it's from so horses and donkeys are different species. They look very similar. They've been arguably domesticated in some similar ways. They can breed together, and they do produce offspring. It's, depending on the direction, it's either a mule or a hinny is what we call them. But that offspring is sterile and can't continue the lineage. So that is it. The reason I think it comes up a lot is because the definition of species is a little flexible. It can, I don't want to say subjective, but the very specific metrics are a little bit movable. And the one thing that people absolutely cannot argue about is if two species cannot produce fertile offspring, you unequivocally can't, you cannot say that they are not different species. They absolutely are different species if that's not something they can do, which is why that's like a black and white line in the sand kind of thing.
Yeah, and most are, it seems like, especially lately, are not that easy. It's hard, Chad. It's hard. But no, so long answer, Smikes. No, they did not check any breeding compatibilities with these species. Instead, don't worry, Sparky. We're getting to that. We're getting to that with the new species. They did do a bunch of physical measurements. I was looking for sequencing, like we've talked about, like if there was a good sequencing experiment done. They went with a few regions on the mitochondrial genome and a few regions on the nuclear genome as well. They did not do the entire genome, just like a couple of more short regions, and they're like, these are significantly different enough where we feel like collectively taken that these are different species.
Significantly different enough. Well, I have questions about what that means, but okay.
Yep. So only a couple of gene spectra they were looking at. They were not looking across the whole genome, which I actually don't know now, thinking about all of the papers that we've looked at on this topic, if the more common thing is just a particular region or the whole genome.
It's the whole genome is pretty uncommon. It's just very expensive. Yeah, it's still very expensive.
What's different? Yeah, so the different enough actually, when it seems like it varies between papers, which makes it kind of difficult to have that interpretation. And then again, they're looking at region spectra flight that they're claiming is under high evolutionary pressure, so that if these are in fact different species, there'll be enough of a divergence. And then again, what is enough? It's not the most convincing evidence for me, but what they did do is they did a bunch of physical measurements on the organism in terms of the body measurements, the skeletal measurements, and there seemed to be a fair number of differences between them on that front. And then after they parsed them out into different species, they found that those males actually turned different colors based on that new species delineation. So it wasn't that one species was turning a bunch of different colors. It was that was actually two separate species.
I find that
so
interesting.
I feel like
I think that might be enough to drive mating selection right there. If the males are turning whole different colors during mating season.
Yeah.
I find that possibly persuasive.
We actually, again, we don't know if they have any of this mating behavior. We looked at, or the researchers looked at a few distinct regions. Again, with this species, they did a few genome sequence regions. So they were looking at these different species of lizard. The way they identified them was sequencing a few particular regions. They did a bunch of body measurements, and then I think the most convincing one is looking at the coloration, that they were different during reproductive season. They were looking at these from 2009 to 2021 and trying to get a survey of if they're endangered or not, to get Sparky's question, because these are eaten and used for quote-unquote medicine. There is no medicinal purpose as far as we're aware. So there we go. That is your first science news story, the new species of the week. Unfortunately, endangered already for 2 of the 4 of them, but I think pretty convincing that there are new species being utilized here.
Do they have any other pictures of, so in panel B, where that little guy's orange, is that the only one that changes color during mating season? You said that they turned different, or they were different colors during mating season. Do they have any other pictures?
No, so it's actually pretty scant on images. Hopefully this study be used to inform. I don't know what the goal is of a cryptic caramel from that perspective. I think it would be neat to inform on the conservation status of these animals. And especially because, they're now considered to be different species, and so it's like you have this opportunity to keep these different species alive. But I mean, they didn't make any kind of big point of it beyond suggesting that, you know, there might maybe should be some change for at least two of these animals. Like they could look at and seeing the conservation policies of these other two areas. So
here's a question. If it took scientists this long to figure out that they're different species, do you think people who are living with the animals, who are more familiar with them, are aware that they're different? Like, whose error was this on? Like, was it just scientists never bothered to closely look closely enough at these guys, or do you think it's that they're actually really extremely difficult to tell apart? So, except during mating season or whatever.
That is a great question. The other thing that I really didn't understand either, and there was no real justification for beyond like some hand waving, is why it took so long. Right? So like it almost felt like it was a hobby project that someone had. Like that's really what the vibes that it gave me was like. There just happened to be these like few people who were like, let's just like go look at these things from time to time, and then maybe like when they did like eventually they're like, oh, maybe they had some money for sequencing and they tested it. And they're like, oh, maybe like that's what it felt like. So I can't tell like how much was actually known really beforehand. In terms of like what the people who actually live in these places, like did they know if there was a difference between what they were going for, or and maybe that's why like there's, you know, differences. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not a special like I don't know. There's a lot of questions about the paper that I feel like again like I wanted to know more about the background of it, of how like it was originally figured out and like who decided to even embark on this. Like that's why I feel like because of the length of time it just felt like someone's side passion project, which is great that it came out, right? But I just, you know, like some behind the scenes info would have been cool on it.
Yeah, it's not, but you know, it can be hard to actually get that information. You have to like know one of the scientists. Very rarely do they actually put it in the paper. I mean, maybe they were surveying this region for a more glamorous and exciting study. And like you said, there was this passion project on the side. They had this little other hustle going.
It doesn't matter either way. I just thought it'd be kind of cool to know what that was from, but we don't know what that background is. And and again, they're not the ones that are endangered are not like critically endangered. So it's not like we're at a point of no return. That's why they were suggesting that maybe if the rules and regulations of a given area were adopted, then they could be brought in and everything would end up being okay. Yeah. So. Okay. If that's it for all the questions on that one, then that's the first science news story of the night. What do you think? Are you convinced that this is a new species? Are you happy with it? Are you disgusted by it?
I'm not. I mean, I want to see pictures.
Coffee Rocks did mention with the color change, like for like seeing the more pictures, that it's kind of interesting that they have this color change during mating season and then they switch back. And so it's like, you know, you stick out for predators potentially for a little while and then you switch back to being more camouflaged.
I mean, that's it is a pretty common strategy, especially in lizards, I would say, but I can think of some fish that do it. It's not wildly uncommon.
No, I think Coffee Rocks is saying that it's just cool.
But yeah, no, it is really cool because it's like, that's energy. That's a lot of energy, and like you said, like, to make the bright colors requires a lot of like metabolic energy. And then also, you are not great at hiding in, like camouflaging oneself when you're like running around bright orange. So it is a very nice balancing act that a lot of animals have come up with, where they're just gonna become flamboyant and ridiculous during mating season and then low-key it the rest of the year. I love it. I would really like to see more. I feel like a child asking for a picture book, but like that's how I feel. I just like, convince me, like they're just telling me that they're different colors during mating season and then they're not showing them to me, and that's just...
I mean, I've liked the other papers that we've had when it was just even a singular species and there were so many images of just even like there wasn't a color change. It was just like different angles, and here's 3 examples of the same animal, and here's another 3 of the male and female comparison, and just like, I don't know, it would have been nice to see that.